Hey, hello. Father Steve coming to you from the recording studio at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Clear Spring, Maryland. I'm the vicar at St. Andrew's Episcopal Church in Clear Spring, Maryland, and also serving as the interim rector at St. Thomas's Episcopal Church in Hancock, and both these in the Episcopal Diocese of Maryland. So we're coming up on the fifth Sunday of Lent. And our readings, we're going to do a little Bible study here and just give you an idea of what we're looking at for our readings for the fifth Sunday of Lent, which is March 26, 2023. So we will have, our Old Testament will be Ezekiel, chapter 37, verses 1 through 14. Now that's our Old Testament, which is Ezekiel 37, verses 1 through 14. Psalm 130 as our reading. We will not, as custom, will not be studying the Psalm in our Bible study today. And then our epistle is Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 11. Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 11. And then our gospel is Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 1 through 45, the raising of Lazarus. So there you have our readings for Lent 5, the fifth Sunday of Lent, for March 26, 2023. So we're going to move right into it, and just a little background on Ezekiel. So if you're following us, just remember to want to pause it to process the questions. Just hit that little equal sign and pause it, and then you can move on, hit the arrow to move on. So, with our background on Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 through 14. In this chapter, Ezekiel envisioned a valley full of dry bones that would rise, come together as intact skeletons, take on flesh, and breathe with life. Probably sounds familiar, does it not? It's one of the readings in the Easter Vigil. So when God told Ezekiel that the bones are the whole house of Israel, Ezekiel prophesied to the exiled Israelites who were living in Babylon. This prophecy was one of several that offered the Israelites hope for the future. God promises people a future return to their home in the land of Israel. This chapter was the inspiration of the gospel song entitled Dem Bones, Dem Bones. So, first question from this, and this deals with Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 1 through 2. Here's our first question. Describe what Ezekiel saw in the valley. Describe what Ezekiel saw in the valley, and that's 37 verses 1 through 2. Okay. Second question from Ezekiel, and this deals with Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 4 through 6 and verse 9. Ezekiel chapter 37, verses 4 through 6 and verse 9. What did God instruct Ezekiel to prophesy? What did God instruct Ezekiel to prophesy? Okay, our third question is Ezekiel 37, verses 7 through 10. What happened to the bones as a result of Ezekiel's prophecy? What happened to the bones as a result of Ezekiel's prophecy? Okay, our fourth question, and this is Ezekiel 37, verse 11. What did the bones represent? What did the bones represent? A few more questions. We have 9 questions from Ezekiel. Our fifth question is Ezekiel 37, verse 11. Ezekiel 37, verse 11. What was the house of Israel's complaint? What was the house of Israel's complaint? And that's in Ezekiel 37, verse 11. That was our fifth question with Ezekiel. Okay, our sixth question, and this is Ezekiel 37, verses 12 through 14. What were God's words of encouragement to the house of Israel? What were God's words of encouragement to the house of Israel? And that's Ezekiel 37, verses 12 to 14. All right. Question 7 from Ezekiel. Did these verses inspire you with hope? Explain that. Did these verses inspire you with hope? Two more questions from Ezekiel. Do these verses teach you about God's control over life and death? Do these verses teach you about God's control over life and death? Okay, our last question from Ezekiel. Can you apply this account to a similar situation in today's world? Explain. Can you apply this account to a similar situation in today's world? Explain. Okay, so let's move on to our epistle. Okay, so we're going to look at Romans 8, verses 6 through 11. Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 11. And a little background. So Paul warned us to think carefully about our actions. When we are selfish, dishonest, unkind, or immoral, we are living according to the flesh, contrary to the will of God. When we believe in Jesus Christ and are guided by the Spirit, we have life and peace. So this deals with Romans, okay? So Romans chapter 8, verses 6 through 11. Okay, our first question. What choices do we have and what are their consequences? This is from Romans 8, 6. What choices do we have and what are the consequences? Our second question from Romans, and this is Romans 8, chapter 8, verses 7 through 8. This is Romans chapter 8, verses 7 through 8. What happens when a person chooses to disobey God's laws? What happens when a person chooses to disobey God's law? Okay, our third question, and this is Romans 8, 9, our third question. If you do not have the Spirit of Christ within you, but consider yourself to be a good person, is this enough to be acceptable to God? This is going to generate some discussion, is it not? So this is Romans 8, 9. If you do not have the Spirit of Christ within you, but consider yourself to be a good person, is this enough to be acceptable to God? Two more questions from Romans. Question 4. And this deals with Romans chapter 8, verses 9 through 11. Chapter 8, verses 9 through 11. What are the advantages of having the Spirit living within you? What are the advantages of having the Spirit living within you? Okay. Let's go to the last question from Romans. What would you say to a person who wanted to become a Christian if he, she asked you to explain these verses? What would you say to a person who wanted to become a Christian if they asked you to explain these verses? Okay, we good on that? Now let's get to the raising of Lazarus. And this is John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. Another one of those long gospel readings, and we have to warn our acolytes. It's a long reading, so if you have your acolyte holding the gospel book for you or you have a crucifer standing there, we kind of let them, hey, this is a long reading. Not as long as the last 2 weeks, though, but anyway. somewhat longer. The last 2 weeks have been very long. Okay, so we have the raising of Lazarus. This is John chapter 11, verses 1 through 45. Little background. The raising of Lazarus from the dead was very dramatic because Lazarus was completely wrapped for burial and he had been dead for 4 days. The Jews believed that the life of a person stayed near them for 3 days after death. Jesus told them motives for this miracle in verse 4 when he stated, it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of Man may be glorified by means of it. The account of this miracle demonstrates the strength of the love that Christ had for Lazarus. Jesus loved Lazarus enough to raise him just as he loves us and will raise us from death to eternal life. So, questions, here we go. Our first question, to whom was Lazarus related? Who was Lazarus related to? And that's John 11, verses 1 through 2. Simple answers. Who was he related to? Okay, our second question from John. What did Jesus say and do when he heard that Lazarus was ill? What did Jesus say and do when he heard that he was ill? And that's John 11, 4 through 7. You might say, what did Jesus not do? So what did Jesus say and do when he heard that he was ill? A lot of questions for this one, for our gospel reading. Next question. What did the disciples warn Jesus not to? Why did the disciples warn Jesus not to go to Bethany? Why did the disciples warn Jesus not to go to Bethany? And that's John 11, 8. Why did he warn Jesus not to go to Bethany? Good on that? This deals with John 11, 9 through 10. What was the response of Jesus to the warning? What was his response to their warning? And that's 11, 9 through 10. John 11, 9 through 10. Okay, moving on. Describe the physical status of Lazarus. John 11, 11 and 14. Describe the physical status of Lazarus. Good. Our next question. What did Jesus learn when he reached Bethany? And that's John 11, 17. What did Jesus learn upon reaching Bethany? What did he learn? Next question. What did Martha think when Jesus said Lazarus would rise again? What did Martha think when Jesus said Lazarus would rise again? And that's chapter 11, verses 23 to 24. What did she think when Jesus said he will rise again? Okay, our next question. What was Jesus' answer to Martha? That's John 11, 25 to 26. What was his answer to Martha? That's in John 11, 25 to 26. Okay. So what encouragement do you receive from this answer? What encouragement do you receive from this answer? That's 6 more questions. Okay, moving on to John 11, verses 32 to 37. Question comes for John 11, 32 to 37. What was Mary's reaction to the death of Lazarus? What was the reaction of the Jewish mourners? What was the reaction of Jesus? So what was Mary's reaction to the death of Lazarus? What was the reaction of the Jewish mourners? And what was the reaction of Jesus? And that's John 11, 32 to 37. We good on that? Okay. Next question. What was Jesus' prayer? What was his prayer? And that's John 11, 41 to 42. What was the prayer that Jesus had in John 11, verses 41 to 42? What was Jesus' prayer? Okay, let's move on here. So, what did Jesus command Lazarus to do? John 11:43. What did Jesus command Lazarus to do? And the other question, we really don't need to pause, is what was the result? So you can put these two questions together. What did Jesus command Lazarus to do in John 11:43? And what was the result? And that's verse 44. A couple more questions. Two more questions. Describe the reaction of some of the witnesses, and that's John 11:45. Describe the reaction of some of the witnesses. And that's John 11:45. Okay, last question on this gospel reading. What impressed you the most in this account? What really impresses you most in this account? Okay, we're good? All right. So these are the Bible study questions for the lectionary for the readings for Lent number 5, March 26, 2023. As you know, after Lent 5, the following Sunday is Palm Sunday. We have Holy Week. Check your church schedule. It's very busy. Something going on every day. So be aware of the church schedule that's posted around your churches. If you have the ability, if you don't have it printed out, take a picture of it. But there's something going on every day during Holy Week in your Episcopal churches. So anyway, God bless and continue to keep it a good Lent.